Willow Place Inn sits in the village of Hudson, Quebec, about 40 kilometers west of Montreal. A fire destroyed the building in 1989. What stands there now was rebuilt to match the 18th century style of what was lost. The original structure went up in 1820 as a family home. 4 years later, François Desjardins bought it and turned the main floor into a general store. He wasn't just running a business. Desjardins was part of a group pushing back against an appointed council that ignored the elected assembly in favor of wealthy interests. By the early 1830s, tension was building. In 1837, he began storing guns and ammunition in the basement. The store became a place of private meetings tied to plans for armed resistance. A maid named Mary Kirkbride worked in the house during this time. She overheard what was being discussed. From there, the story splits. One version says she left and reported everything to the authorities. Another claims she was killed to keep her silent, then buried in the basement. After Desjardins was jailed for his role in the Lower Canada Rebellion of 1837, the property changed hands. The Brasseur family turned it into a boarding house. Later, it became an inn. By the 1970s, people in the area were openly talking about what was happening inside. Staff described furniture moving on its own, doors shut without warning. Stones appeared piled in front of a guest room. There were also reports of perfume drifting through empty spaces, and the sound of a woman singing in places where no one was there. Some wondered if the stories were meant to attract attention. The people working there, they certainly didn't think so. After the rebuild, the activity seemed to ease off, but it never fully stopped. When it does happen, it tends to begin on Halloween and continue through November. Skeptics point to the timing. They see it as an expectation-shaping experience. Still, the disturbances carry on into a month tied to violence in this region. Fighting between patriots and government forces first broke out there in November of 1837. That raises a final question. If Mary Kirkbride heard plans connected to those events, then whatever happened to her likely happened in that same month. Buckins. It sits deep in the interior of Newfoundland and Labrador. In the late 1927, an American smelting and refining company completed a 35-kilometer railway linking Buckins to Millertown, Newfoundland and Labrador. The line was built to move ore from the Lucky Strike mine where zinc, lead, and copper were being extracted. Not long after the railway opened, the Buckins River Dam failed. Water rushed through the valley and destroyed a wooden trestle along the line. Over time, other accidents followed. Some of them claimed the lives of workers tied to the mining operations. Stories began to form around those deaths. People suggested the men might still be present in some way, tied to this railway they helped build. A few years into the line's operation, reports started to surface. People described a distant light moving along the tracks at night. At first, it was seen from a distance, unclear and hard to explain. Then it became more specific. Those near the rails said it looked like an oncoming train. For anyone already on a train, it felt a little different. 2 sets of headlights would appear to close in on each other. A collision seemed unavoidable. At the last moment, a second train would vanish without impact. Similar reports appeared on other rail lines across the province. There were also occasional accounts of a conductor seen on passenger trains that wasn't supposed to be there. Rail service in Newfoundland ended in 1989. Since then, the tracks have largely remained in place. No recent sightings of the ghost train have been recorded. Still, the rails are there, stretching through the landscape. And the question that lingers is simple enough. If it was ever there before, there's nothing stopping it from appearing again. In the winter of 1906, George Stanley killed Freeman Harvey, cutting off his head and hiding the remains in a basement. Stanley later claimed Harvey had left town and handed over all his possessions. People in Windsor, Nova Scotia, didn't buy it. A search of his property revealed the body. He was arrested, tried, and convicted. By the summer of 1906, Stanley was executed. Not long after, Judge Charles Edgar DeWolf reported seeing something strange in a basement window. A headless figure. He connected it directly to Harvey, whose remains had been found hidden in the same house. The judge had become convinced that he had seen the victim's ghost. A few days later, something else happened that deepened that belief. A barrel appeared in the street, rolling on its own. It moved along Water Street, crossed the road, changed direction, and continued down the sidewalk, when it turned into the judge's front lawn. When DeWolf caught up to it, he heard low groaning coming from inside. A voice followed. It said, "I am Freeman Harvey." After that, the disturbances didn't stop. People in town began reporting strange reactions around the judge. Some described boys and clerks suddenly freezing in place as if in a trance. DeWolf, familiar with hypnotism, would speak calmly and gesture before they snapped out of it. Elsewhere, coins seemed to fall from nowhere. Light bulbs broke on impact with the ground. Furniture in a factory started moving without explanations, and voices called out the judge's name. Concerned by the pattern, DeWolf reached out to a group that investigated claims of hauntings scientifically. He also gathered written statements from others in town who had seen similar events. That group sent Hereward Carrington to Windsor. Carrington met with DeWolf and reviewed the reports, then visited several locations tied to the incidents. At a grocery store, an apple suddenly flew across the room, narrowly missing him. He noticed something important during the moment. The grocer's reaction didn't match surprise, more like embarrassment. At a furniture factory, workers described chairs falling, pipes knocking, and sudden movement in the building. Then Carrington saw it himself. Rocking chairs began moving without anyone touching them. He examined them closely. Behind the chairs, he found a hole in the floor. A string ran through it, connected directly to the furniture. From below, a simple pull could set everything in motion. Carrington said nothing and continued observing. More incidents followed. Coins dropped, objects shifted, and another worker appeared to enter a trance, though Carrington noticed he seemed to be fighting back a laugh. At that point, Carrington concluded the events were not supernatural. Still, he didn't reveal what he had found to DeWolf right away. As he continued through town, more people began admitting the truth. Some said they had thrown objects. Others admitted to pretending to be frozen or frightened when the judge was near. The pattern became clearer and clearer. The entire situation had started with a runaway barrel. A group of boys lost out of it in the street, and it rolled into the judge's path. When they saw how seriously he reacted, they turned it into a prank. One of them even hid inside the barrel and pretended to be Harvey speaking from beyond the grave. From there, the story spread and escalated. More people joined in, each adding new tricks. The judge never fully accepted the explanation, even after Carrington's report made it clear of what had happened. His interpretation, it never shifted. That was the end of the Windsor account, and the pattern it left behind was fairly simple. What began as fear of the unknown had been built, piece by piece by piece, by people who expected him to believe it. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed these tales from Canadian ghost stories. And until next time, there's probably a video on screen now if you wish to watch more. If not, I'll see you next time through the foggy veils.